Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most compassionate. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Dear brothers, sisters and friends, today we're going to be talking about, can you be good without Allah? Can you be good without God? Now think about the question. It's not saying, can you be good without believing in Allah? It's not saying, can you be good without the belief in God? It's saying, can you be good without Allah? And the argument I'm going to pose today is that we can't truly have goodness in an objective manner if God or Allah doesn't exist. Think about this. If Allah does not exist, if God does not exist, we can't have good. We can't have good in an objective sense. And the summary of the argument is in the following way. Number one, if God does not exist, objective morals do not exist. Number two, objective morals do exist. Three, and this is the conclusion, therefore God exists. Think about this. This is an argument from objective morality. Since there is objective morality, and we know this, we know morality is objective, therefore God must exist, regardless if you believe in Him or not. And I'm going to explain why. But before I do that, I have to make you understand, what do we mean by objective morality? Now, by objective, we mean that the morals are good regardless of human opinion. The morals are good regardless of human subjectivity. Morals are objectively good regardless if all the world came together and said something else. For instance, imagine there was a nation, and let's take the nation Egypt, and say in Egypt they said the dictatorship of Hosni Mubarak is actually good. It's good. We would still disagree with this because we know objectively that Hosni Mubarak was wrong, was bad. So from this perspective, we see that objective good means it transcends human subjectivity. It goes up and beyond human consensus, human agreement. Now take, for example, a school hall full of children, and the teacher is trying to teach them that killing someone is bad, is objectively bad. If all the children now said to that teacher, no, it's good, does it mean it's good? No, it's not. It doesn't. It's still objectively bad, regardless of their opinion. So this is what I mean by objective. It transcends human subjectivity. It goes up and beyond and above human understanding. This is what I mean by objective. So, the argument here is that in order for objective morals to exist, objective good to exist, God must exist. Now, why am I saying this? Now, think about it. In absence of God, in absence of Allah, do we have a foundation to justify objective morality? Think about this. Do we have a foundation to justify objective good? I would say no, because we have only two possible options. And those options are biology or evolution, or social pressure. Social pressure basically means the individual subjective experiences of a collective group. Because an individual subjective experience plus another individual subjective experience plus another individual subjective experience is still subjective experience, okay? This is what we mean by social pressure and social consensus. So let's analyze these two options. Now, can biology or evolution provide an objective grounding, an objective foundation for objective good? No. The reason for this is because what does evolution say or biology say? Is that we as human beings are a product of a very lengthy evolutionary process. Our morals have evolved like our unwanted hair or our ears or our teeth. And therefore our morality doesn't have any true meaning. it doesn't have any true meaning is because it's dependent on changes, on biological changes over time. And if it's dependent upon these changes, therefore, there is no such thing as objective good. It's going to be subjective or subject to time and subject to biological changes. So biology can't be an objective foundation, an objective basis for morality. And the reason for this as well is because if you look into various scientific literature or the philosophy of science, you see that many philosophers of science agree with this, that we don't have any true meaning to our morals, or we don't have any true objective basis to make morals objective. This is why Professor Michael Rules from the University of Guelph, he said that when we say love thy neighbor as thyself, we think we're referring above and beyond themselves. But we're not. Because in reality, morality doesn't have any true meaning. Because morals from this perspective are only there to aid survival and reproduction. And morals evolve over time from a biological point of view. So, biology can't give an objective foundation for moral values or morality or objective good. Because it can't be the source or the nature, it can't provide an adequate explanation for the nature of objective morality. So what's next? Well, let's go to social pressure. What did we just discuss what social pressure was? It was basically the subjective relative experience of one individual plus another individual plus another individual. And the sum of this, the totality of this, is just a subjective and relative experience. So social pressure, by definition, is not going to be objective because it's the subjective experience of one person plus the subjective understanding or experience of another person and of another person of another person. So therefore, you can't provide an explanation for objective morality, and it can't be the source of objective morality because it's subjective in nature. And if we look at the practical implications of this, they're quite severe. Because if we accept social pressure or social consensus to be a source or nature for objective morality, then we have huge problems. Therefore, we have to say that the killing of 6 million Jews in Nazi Germany is objectively good, because there was a social consensus at the time in 1940s Germany. But since we disagree with this, therefore we know it can't be good. We know that killing 6 million Jews is actually objectively morally wrong. So this is the huge implications, the severe implications of accepting social pressure as a basis for objective morals. It would mean we have to accept the killing of 6 million innocent human beings. So from this perspective, we don't have an explanation for the source or nature of objective morality, because biology can't explain objective morals, nor can social pressure. But since objective morals exist, how can we explain them? Well, the way we can explain them is by according to the reality of Allah, of God. Because God is the only concept that transcends human subjectivity. Allah has the totality of knowledge. Allah is wise. Allah knows and we don't. Allah is above human limited subjective and relative experiences and understanding. Therefore, by definition, Allah can provide an objective grounding for morality because Allah is objective. And He is the source of objective morals because Allah is objective. He transcends human subjectivity. So from this perspective, we have shown, brothers, sisters and friends, that the source of objective morals and to explain the nature of objective morality is God. So look what we've done. Since we know objective morals do exist, because we know if I were to kill a 5-year-old boy right in front of you, you would objectively know this is wrong deep down inside you. So since we know objective morality exists, it necessitates God's existence. It necessitates the existence of Allah, because Allah is the only explanation for the source and nature of objective morals. Biology isn't, and we've just discussed why. Social pressure isn't, and we've just discussed why. God or Allah is the only concept that transcends human subjectivity. He explains the rational grounding for objective morals, and He is the source for objective morals because He is objective. Now, what we're going to discuss after the break, brothers and sisters, some contentions against this argument. For example, many people bring into the argument, or they bring as a contention, as a counter-argument, Plato's dilemma or Euthyphro's dilemma. And we're going to discuss this and explain why this dilemma is a false dilemma. Because this dilemma essentially says, is something good because God said so, or is something good is because what God says is good? So it leaves us with a dilemma. If we take any option, then essentially it leaves morality as something arbitrary, because God could say, well, He could have said that it's objectively good to kill everyone over the age of 55. Or on the other hand, the other side of the dilemma, basically if we say what God says is, whatever God says is good, then therefore we have a problem, because therefore we already know what good is to define what He says as good. Do you see? So let's deal with this dilemma after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most compassionate. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ikhwan and akhawat, brothers and sisters, we're discussing, can we be good without God? Not can we be good if we believe in God or if we don't believe in God, but rather can we be good without God? And essentially what we're saying is, since objective morals, objective good, objective bad exists and it's real, it necessitates God's existence, regardless if you believe in Him or not. Because God, as we explained, is the only source and the only foundation to explain objective morals. Because evolution can't do it, biology can't do it, and nor can social pressure, which we discussed earlier in this program. Now we're dealing with the contention, the counter-argument to this argument, which was Plato's dilemma or Euthyphro's dilemma, which essentially was, is something good because God said so, or is it good because whatever God says is good? Now if we take any of the side of the dilemma, we have an issue, because one, morals could be arbitrary. Then God could have said anything. He could have said, kill every old woman, or kill every child over the age of 5. Do you see the problem here? Or on the other hand, if we take the other side of the dilemma, it means that we already know what good is, because we're saying that when God says something, it's going to be good. If that's the case, then we already know what good is external to God. So we have a dilemma. But the issue here is, I think this is a false dilemma. And the reason it's a false dilemma, because all we have to say is that Allah or God is good. And His commands, when He commands something, comes from His nature. And His nature is good. And this is profound. This is very profound for us to understand. But for someone, it may not be enough. They may say, look, there's an issue here. How do you know His nature is good? Well, this is very simple. We could deal with it in two ways. The first way is by basically saying that God as a concept is the only being worthy of worship. As we believe in Islam, La ilaha illallah. There is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, except God. So if He is the only being worthy of worship, then conceptually, He is the most highest moral being. Because the only being worthy of worship is going to be the most highest moral being. So therefore, whatever He commands is going to be good because it comes from His nature. The other aspect is that we know God is good because of revelation, because the Quran tells us. And we know the Quran to be from the divine, from other external arguments. So essentially we have broken down Euthyphro's dilemma. It's a false dilemma because we could bring a third option and say that God is good and His commands come from His nature and He is the being worthy of worship, and the being worthy of worship is the most highest moral being, and therefore it breaks the dilemma, it makes it a false dilemma. So essentially, ikhwan and akhawat, we have shown that in order for objective morals to exist, Allah or God must exist. Because we have shown that it requires a foundation. For objective morals to exist, they require an explanation. They require a source. They require a foundation. So what source or foundation is by definition objective? We explained that biology of evolution can't be objective because what does it say? It says we are a product of a lengthy evolutionary process, and this process is essentially subjective because it's subject to time and subject to biological changes. And if that's the case, then it makes morals subjective and not objective. So you can't explain objective morality. What about social pressure then? Can social pressure explain the source or become the foundation for objective morality? No, because social pressure is what? One subjective individual plus another subjective individual plus another subjective individual with their relative understanding. And if you sum all of that together, all you're going to get is subjectivism or relativism. So it can't provide an objective basis or a strong rational foundation for objective morality. The only plausible explanation for objective morals and the source of objective morality, and to justify the nature of morality in these morals being objective, is Allah, is God. Because God by His very nature is objective. He transcends human subjectivity. He goes above and beyond human relative subjective understanding. He goes above human consensus and human subjectivity. Hence, we have a very strong argument from morality. This is what you would call an axiomatic argument, which you start with a certain premise. And the certain premise we started with is that morals are objective. We know this deep down within us. Now, an atheist or agnostic may say, well, I don't believe morals are objective in nature. Well, if that's the case, then you can't make any moral judgment in an objective way about Islam. You can't now say Islam and religion in general is backward and barbaric. You can't say Islam oppresses women. Although we know it doesn't, but you know all these typical cliches, these typical misconceptions. You can't even dare to utter them in an objective way. You know, we have these anti-Islamic folk or academics or commentators. They point the finger at the Islamic tradition and says, look, Islam is backward, barbaric, immoral. But if you don't believe in objective morals in the first place, you can't even claim this in an objective sense. And once you start to claim it in an objective sense, then you necessitate God's existence, because the source of objective morals, and to justify the nature of morality in that they are objective, you require God's existence in the first place. So that is the whole irony behind the topic. So, ikhwan and akhawat, let me summarize the argument for you. If God doesn't exist, objective morals do not exist. Objective morals do exist. Therefore, God does exist. Here you have an amazing argument for morality. You start with objective morality, that you know it to be true. And if it is true, then it requires God, because God is the only explanation for the nature of objective morals and provides a rational foundation for objective morality, because God transcends human subjectivity. So there you have it, an argument for morality. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.